This is the Open University.
Hello and welcome to the Open University, and this is yet another in the ongoing series, Nick photographing his life in Paris, or narrating his life in Paris. Nobody really looks at these when they're published on Tumblr, because Tumblr is tumbleweed these days. I kind of like that, because it's not advertising effective, it's not algorithmically curated like the other, like Instagram, for instance. So I can just sling these pictures up there and nobody really notices. So transitions, this is what I do when I move from Berlin to Paris. This is the main transition I make in my life now. And the last dribs and drabs of my forthcoming Isivu album were recorded in Berlin in early October. And that was basically my life. This photograph shows the cushion I was sitting on for essentially a month with my headphones on and my little USB audio attachment, my iPad, and my guitar. I think I might have just been working on the Art Creep that day. I don't know, the remake of the Art Creep song. But yeah, that was essentially my life for a month, very disembodied. So I like to return to the land of the living, essentially, when I transitioned to Paris. One of the things I saw in Frankfurt on the way on the transition was this Bowie Odyssey 71 book, which is actually by a guy called Simon Goddard. This is the German version of it. This was in Koenig Bookshop in Frankfurt. The blurb for the English edition says, Britain 1971, strange land of hot pants, moral outrage, anarchist bombs and sexual revolution. As Mark Bolan is hailed as the nation's teenage saviour, the forgotten hope called David Bowie searches for the spark to relight his fire. He finds it in London's gay clubland and the stoned fields of Glastonbury, the speedy streets of New York City, and his new rock and roll allies, Lou Reed and Iggy Pop. So I think Simon is doing one of these books for each year of Bowie's 70s, so it sounds quite promising. And if you read, you can read the intro on the Amazon site. It looks quite interesting. This is Paris now. I'm back in Paris, and this is a range of furniture produced by Super Studio, who are an architectural firm from the late 60s founded in Florence. And they made a line of furniture which was called Quaderna, kind of ironic and iconic minimalist furniture, because they had this idea of the endless monument, turning everything into a sort of graph paper surface. They were actually kind of very tongue-in-cheek about that, though. Their minimalism was quite tongue-in-cheek, because they said in 1971 that if design is merely an inducement to consume, then we must reject design. If architecture is merely the codifying of bourgeois models of ownership in society, then we must reject architecture. And if architecture and town planning is merely the formalization of present unjust social divisions, then we must reject town planning and its cities. Until all design activities are aimed toward meeting primary needs. Until then, design must disappear. Ironically, here we are at the Conman store in Paris, and this radical concept is being sold as design for the lifestyles of the rich and famous. But skipping forward, still in 1971 though, something I found in a shop called, ironically called Centre Commercial, commercial centre, shopping centre really. It was this hunky-dory t-shirt, or sweater rather, made by Scottish a sort of cottage industry in Scotland, in the Highlands actually, called Hades, and it's David Bowie hunky-dory. Usually I don't allow any writing on my clothes, but for this I had to make an exception, because I don't know, this was a very important record for me. And so I've been walking around, and people, instead of saying, oh, there's a funny looking man with an eye patch, they now say, oh, there's a funny looking David Bowie fan with an eye patch. Here I am throwing poses in our studio, a flat here in Paris. But that's skipping a little bit ahead, just to keep the theme of 1971. The first things that were happening in Paris, the first events that I sort of glommed onto were some art fairs, 3 art fairs all happening at once. and that was Art Basel Plus, which is the Paris version of Art Basel. I skipped that because it looked a bit snobby, and but simultaneously with that was Asia Now. So that's a pan-Asian art fair, and there were something like 50 countries participating this year, all Asian countries, but from, I think from Turkey onwards, everything qualifies as Asia. So it was nice. It was good. It was in La Monnaie, which was a building I hadn't seen, next to at the south end of the Pont des Arts. And also was an independent fair called L'International, at which my Tokyo friends, Misako Rosen Gallery, were showing amongst many others. There was also actually a funny, or rather sinister, Cheburashka. This is Nukarashka, is the nuclear version of Cheburashka at that art fair. Cheburashka, of course, featured in the video for Monkey from my new album. And gosh, all these internal rhymes, monkey dory, hunky dory. This is the art fair, which was in a very stripped down old department store. And this is Liberty, which is a pâtisseur, which I was rather intrigued to see. It's Paris, Tokyo, and Kyoto. Although they're a bit different. The patisserie they have in the Japanese branches is a bit more sort of florid and Japanesey, unsurprisingly. This is, gosh, what's that? That's just a poster in a second-hand clothes shop that I saw. Artek Alto. I just photograph these things really because I like the typography. This is again the window of the Conran store. Golly, this is this is an OFR, and they have a lot of books from a closed down bookshop, L'Éclaireur, and this was there are several Kirchner books, and of course Kirchner also features on my new record. This is an alternative self-portrait of himself in soldier's uniform. I'd seen the standing one, but I hadn't seen this one. And that's Angela Davis, I think, on the cover of a book in the Yvonne Lambert Gallery, which has a very good bookshop. And this is the Stockholm clothes shop, Acne Studios. And they also have a magazine, which I just discovered recently, which I didn't know about before. J'ai vu des vêtements sauvages. This is a book in a manga bookshop. There are a lot of... Paris loves manga, so you have a lot of manga specialized bookshops. Totally Wired. This is a history of the British music press, the rise and fall of the music press. I was just thinking about that today, how I used to. When I lived in Paris in the 90s, I'd go to the Rue de Rivoli, where there's a branch of W.H. Smith, and I'd look at the so-called Inkies, the music press from Britain, and it would all look somehow weirdly provincial from Paris, a bit shabby, like a shabby Monopoly version of real fame, Monopoly money version of fame, where you could be rich, have an illusory richness. It's all looking very retro and very like dead subculture now, especially with the death of Keith Levine today, announced today anyway. Even post-punk, begins to look like a very historic thing, and I suppose it's funny how some things are still very present, like Paris, when you're in the Place des Vosges. Here I am walking around the Place des Vosges. Paris's history feels very present, whereas the more recent present is forgotten. It's a bit like what I was talking about in my anxious interval article on my old blog, that some things become occluded. The recent past becomes occluded by a sort of amnesia, sort of cultural amnesia, and other things from a much more safe historical past, a much more distant historical past, keep asserting themselves. So it's really strange looking at what used to be record shops and seeing that they're shoe shops now, or they might even be old magazine shops where people go to buy old newspapers and magazines. Some things are being preserved and some things are being erased constantly. This curtain reminded me of some curtains I had in 1978 in my bedroom in 9 Drummond Place. These are secondhand clothes because Relique, my favourite secondhand 70s retro clothes shop, has moved actually just a few doors down Rue Nazareth, I think it's called, in the République area of Paris, and this was a sweater I bought just to encourage them really. It's a bit small for me, this sweater, but it's very 70s, sort of graphic device. So buying a lot of clothes because I came with just this orange suitcase that you see down here, and mostly empty as well. And I'd sort of told myself I was going to buy clothes when I got to Paris. So the usual secondhand, very cheap clothes. And gosh, what else can I tell you? This is Cotte, my favourite cafe in Paris. They've been away actually in Seoul because she's Korean, he's French. Gosh, Magali. Yeah, these are books all from L'Éclaireur, which was the second-hand bookshop, which has closed down and been bought out by OFR. This was surprising. This was one of the things seen at the Asia Now Art Fair, and this is Takashi Murakami, a project of pots and packaging for pots made by Takashi Murakami, the Daub and Super Flat and all the rest of it. Very much a departure for him, but he's doing a sort of tongue-in-cheek take on Japanese traditional arts. But how tongue-in-cheek is it? It might actually be genuine. They're very beautiful pots, sort of raku pottery. This was somebody spotted. I think it was like a performance art piece at Asia Now. I don't know who this was, but rather interesting outfit. I find the Paris Vox Pop street style videos that I watch, like Not So Blonde, for instance, video. What are you wearing in Paris? Kind of boring. They always choose boring things, boring looking people. Here's the sister of my girlfriend who's in a cafe called I.O., very good cafe, and there was a rainbow effect from the sun hitting a piece of glass and then bouncing onto her. It reminded me of Naoko Ogawa's jewellery, because she has this sort of conceptual jewellery project. Actually just had an exhibition in Tokyo of it, and she considers light projected onto the body to be a valid sort of jewellery. This is the man I think of as the typical art fair visitor with his brightly coloured t-shirt and tote bag, and I'm a bit sorry for him being bombarded with political messages when he's clearly an aesthete and he's clearly a bourgeois bohemian. He's the missing middle, the person who might be chased out of art fairs if there's not some kind of prettiness in them. This is from the International Art Fair. Oh gosh, what else? This is an image from a church, actually on the ground of the grounds of the Salpêtrière Hospital in Paris. It's got an amazing, I think one of Paris's few Baroque churches. The largest Baroque church in Paris is actually part of the hospital. I think it's deconsecrated, I'm not entirely sure. But it's a very amazing, here it is, amazing space. Beautiful light and stained glass. And these sort of art exhibits which seem to be there permanently. But very stark inside. And this is a publication about goods spotted in the Ricard Foundation's bookshop, which is just behind the Gare Saint-Lazare. Coucou Gourdon. There's probably some play on words that I'm not getting here. Gourdon is a gourd though. And this is my girlfriend's mother with my girlfriend in the gallery, the Ricard gallery. An old manual about tape recorders, which I photographed just because there's a picture of the Uher tape recorder, which my dad used to record my very first compositions when I was pounding on the piano and making up songs like I Can See Japan. This is Tricotin restaurant in the 13th arrondissement, and they're very tasty beef soup, pho soup, Vietnamese food. This is also in the gallery of Ricard Foundation. This is one of my favorite views of Paris. I don't know, it just makes Paris look more like Rome, I suppose, because you have these old kind of Roman arches or pseudo-Roman arches. This is the Rue du Faubourg Saint-Denis. It's a Parisian monument in the 10th. The entablature bears the gilded bronze inscription Ludovico Magno. So it was built, actually, it was built between 1356 and 1383 to protect the right bank of Paris. That's amazing. I didn't realize it was that old. Wow. It was the gate of the city. But to replace the old gateway, Louis XIV commanded the architect to build a monumental archway. So actually it's the 17th century, a lot. But it's inspired by the Arch of Titus in Rome, so that's why it has that Roman look to it. It's inspired by Roman stuff. Piranesi, this is a book in, there's a nice architecture bookshop. On the Rue Notre-Dame de Nazareth, there's a bookshop called Volume, which is art and urbanism. So this is about Piranesi. Piranesi, who made fantasy architecture with a lot of light and shade and arches and almost M.C. Escher-esque amazing studies of possible architecture or impossible architecture for the time anyway. This is the Place des Victoires and a particularly sunny contre-jour image of it, which I was very proud of when I took. There's probably 0 notes on Tumblr, but who cares? This is sort of just people on the street that I found interestingly dressed. They look like Japanese lesbians. But I usually photograph people discreetly from behind, but these people, I was just ducking into a clothes shop and snapped that. The other thing I love is hand-drawn signs. I was thinking about the sleeve for my record at this time, and I wanted to make a sleeve based on this kind of writing. Actually, my first idea was to use a blackboard. I mean, in the end, I just did a still from one of the videos with Benny Hill because he seemed to be a good representative of sexual ambiguity in this particular sketch I used anyway. Where is it? There's a blackboard somewhere here, which I saw on the street and really liked. I used to be like this at school. I would see people's handwriting and I would just be kind of obsessed with and jealous of their ability. There it is. Fête de la Poire. The Festival of the Pear. And this was outside of just a Naturalia, which is a Whole Foods store, again in the 13th arrondissement. But I love the lettering on that. It's just so... I couldn't do that. I worked for hours trying to make a kind of typography based on this, and I couldn't do it with the same kind of charming randomness. I was going to say Momus Isivu in this typography. I should have gone... I was actually going to go back to the store and ask the person who does the lettering on the blackboard to do lettering saying Momus Isivu in that style. But I didn't in the end. I just did my own thing using Kabel with a K, which is the fat, funky typeface. Very 70s. A lot of advertising in the 70s used that. So I kind of like the look it has when you do that with some punctuation around it, like the quotation marks I put around the title on the cover. This was a jacket, this corduroy jacket. I was in Freepstar. There are so many different branches of Freepstar, which is the main sort of second-hand chain in Paris. But I think it's like a franchise because each one is totally different from each other. And the best one is on the Rue des Archives, run by a funny old man in a baseball cap. And this was €5, this jacket. Very good jacket. Italian corduroy jacket. The trousers are German military trousers from Humana. And I'm constantly sort of fine-tuning this kind of breeks and jacket and kind of bright 70s colours look, there's pop. I hate the term pops of colour, but I mean with 70s purples and things like that around quite a conservative... I don't know, just that, is this me? Am I do I have a core of conservatism and then pops of colour, pops of radicalism? I don't know. But I do like people who really are not afraid of colour. These are people outside the Korean Cultural Centre in Paris, which we went to visit. They had exhibitions, pimping Korea to the French public with lacquer work currently and K-pop. These are the two things they've decided, to the traditional and the modern. And these were people outside, so I think they'd just been to the exhibition. I'm not sure, but this lady on the left, I find very admirable the way she's combined completely non-matching colors and textures and patterns and things. Very un-Japanese. I don't think they can be Japanese. I think they must be Koreans. But they're the exception in a chromophobic world. We really are in a colorless world, or a world which uses color much more cautiously. This is a nice subtle use of color, though, these semi-translucent curtains in the Korean Cultural Center. And what else? This is some of the inlaid woodwork shown, Korean lacquerwork, woodwork in the exhibition. That's the part of the K-pop show. There's a K-pop band that uses retro 70s stuff. And this is some of the lacquer that I was talking about as well, the inlaid work, which is not unlike Japanese, but maybe a little more colourful. This is something, a very notable difference. Not only do you have much spicier food in Korea than Japan, but you also have this spicy colour palette. This is a Japanese cafe near Sèvres Babylone area, near the Le Bon Marché. It's called Benshi, and they serve excellent onigiri there and very good coffee too. So, and they also have this fatigued, shabby chic, minimalist plus kind of wabi-sabi is how I think of it, really. I kind of like these interiors when people just leave the wall, really shitty, and even leaving the sort of instructions on the wall. I don't know if you can see it behind me here, where people have marked up the wall with kind of nail markings and measurements and things like that. And they leave that on and it becomes almost like a painting or something. This guy runs an upcycling secondhand clothes shop where they were selling their whole stock for €5. I bought a shirt. I kind of like what he's done with his coiffure, where he has a Japanese lampshade hanging from his man bun. And his moustache, a bit like the one I was sporting in the intro to this video. Gosh, we're running out of time. This is the carrelage, the ceramic walls in Hermès, known for their silk scarves, which my friend Florence Manlic, who's the partner of Gilles, designs for them. She's done many designs for them now and continues to work with them. So we go in there and we look and see if we can spot Florence's scarves. This is some of the sandwiches in, or sando, Japanese for sandwich. Oh, here you can see the markings on the wall in Benshi. And you can see there's sort of egg and tuna sandwiches there. Very tasty indeed, very subtle. This is the magazine that's run by Acne. It's called Atticus. Acne paper. Very fat and glossy magazine. I wonder how many copies they sell. This is at Yvon Laubert again. In the back room they have a gallery. And me with my new €5 cord jacket. What else? This is this is an art school called the École du Perret, which is on the same street as OFR Books, and is partly responsible for that street having a kind of catwalky feel. I like the old Victorian Paris though, and you still see shop fronts which could have been, in the time of Flaubert, would have been there in Paris. And eccentrics around the market where we live, this was somebody just wearing not only mismatching socks, but also mismatching shoes, which I thought was very stylish. There's something I like a lot about this. And this is in the Chinese area, up near the Rue Réaumur. This is an old carrelage, an old mural made with tiles from, see if I can zoom it, I don't know, Cascade of Time it's called. I think it says 1935. It's possible it could be from the 30s, that. And we found a new shop actually quite close to that arch, with selling a lot of Japanese tops. And this was €5, and it says niche on the label. And this is I.O. Cafe. These are some pots which I always photograph when we go to Printemps department store. Me relaxing in Printemps on their soft, comfy sofas. The thing about it, you have a tiny flat in Paris. Often, you can't afford much space, so you have to spend the day out in the city. And I really kind of like that forced extroversion where you have to appear and also to observe. You appear as yourself and you observe others. And the city becomes a kind of extension of your home space. This is something I used to note about Japan, that Tokyo, you could feel comfortable and safe in Tokyo, and the kombini was your refrigerator, and the sento was your bathroom, and you could distribute your flat. Even if you had a very small space to live in, you could distribute the functions of a flat across the city. This is a pietà in our local church, which we call Church of the Holy Fart, because we once walked through there and there was a wedding happening, and we were sneaking past some wedding guests, and one of them, a man in a very smart suit, farted very loudly, not noticing that we were standing right next to him. And then he's probably very embarrassed, but maybe he wasn't, I don't know, and maybe it was a holy fart. Here's a doorway, Art Nouveau kind of doorway that I always like to photograph whenever I pass it. It's just so... it's Art Nouveau turning into a kind of Narnia. There's a sort of sense that there's a magical kingdom behind this door. Even in the most high-rent areas of, Paris, like Le Marais, you find these funny, eccentric little shops where they've done hand-painted signs, Time Prestige. It does repairs to your watch. And there's the guy inside repairing a watch. I don't know. I'm glad they're still there. All those people. These are the people who make a city. Give it some character. The people who are being forced out of cities like New York because you can't make a living just doing these little services. This is another magical doorway. Again in very close to where I'm living. It's showing this Greek motif in the tiles on the floor. Actually, I wanted to photograph. There was the Cartier-Bresson decisive moment, a fail, because when the door was slightly more open, you could get there was a mirrored version of these waves, the wave pattern, which is an ancient Greek motif, and that was really what caught my eye. But then I just managed to catch the door before it slammed shut. This was the Rodin Museum, which we went to the other day, actually, and. I don't know, Rodin is an interesting figure. Rilke, I know him mostly because Rilke worked for him as his assistant or his secretary. I'm not sure if I really like Rodin, the thinker and the kiss and all the rest of it, but I like it when they're graphically laid out like this, it suddenly becomes more attractive to me. In this funny red part of the gift shop where there was a red filter on the window as well, so everything was kind of red. Here's it is a very impressive mansion, the Rodin Museum, with great gardens around it. So it's kind of worth the trip just to see the space it's in. And that's just a photograph. I kind of like the texture of the photograph with the light reflections and things on it more than the sculpture itself. This is the interior of the... I don't know if he actually lived there himself, but it's become the Rodin Museum. And, typical artist who's got 2 or 3 iconic images and, a lot of portraits of Balzac and things like that. It's rather good. They've handed over some of the space to contemporary artists as well. This looks like it's painted in blood. This thing, a door... Is it the lintel? Not the lintel. Above the door. The architrave. We're coming up to the present. Here we are, modelling the latest clothes we bought, things in the market. And that's in the Swedish cafe. Used to be part of the Swedish Institute, but it moved off to a separate place. So some of the lampshades, Swedish lampshades. That's pretty much it. A month in Paris. And lots of diversions, and I hope you've enjoyed it.
Open University.